This is Film Tang.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back.
Oh, I don't know if it's on, but I like it.
You know, we're sitting here like a couple of regular fellas. We're going to make film history.
Can you say that again? Just the way you say it.
Poor baby is starting to lose their head.
They won't know what they're looking at or why they like it, but they'll know they want it.
It's not real time, it's showtime. Are you guys ready?
Hello there again, everyone. Welcome in to episode 239 of Film Tank. Alex Diekman here with you, along with Nick Cheney.
Hello there.
Hi, bud.
Hi.
Good to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you again.
I love that our podcast has been a consistent thing throughout this coronavirus pandemic. So
It's been consistent for us.
not for our listeners. There's been a couple episodes that have
I
slipped
feel
out
like
there.
the weirdest thing before we introduce our wonderful honorary co-host, but I feel like the weirdest thing about Film Tank in a nutshell, as far as how we experienced it and how it actually exists in the world, is like, for us, it is something we do every week. But you would not know it.
Yeah, we're a big fan of releasing the bank of episodes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you just catch up after a long time, I mean, it looks like, oh, look at this long list, but they all have the same release date. So, yeah. So, Anna Bodazadu joining us again. She is the reigning champion of the guests. And, I mean, you're not even really a guest at this point. You've been on so many episodes that you're
That's why-
like on the cusp of
That's
being
why I said
a
honorary co-host.
honorary co-host. I
Yeah.
like it.
That is so incredibly kind. Thank you so
Well,
much.
you earned it, buddy.
Well, thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure, and I love being here with you guys. So
Aw.
It's
thank
fun.
you
Well,
for.
we love having you most of the time, unless you're making us watch Cabin Fever.
Hey, I enjoyed that.
Hey, my next recommendation to Alex is actually a good movie, so I'll let him bring that up whenever he wants. But
Yeah, well, down the road, probably before the end of the summer, which will probably mean a December release date.
So it's like today.
oh my god,
Yeah, that's going great. Boy, let me
so
tell
great.
you, he's trying to save cinema, but he's also ruining it. So, Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, why won't he just like hold it hostage? Like that could save cinema as well. Be like, hey, like honestly, this sounds really dumb, I think, but also I think sometimes the dumbest ideas are actually good marketing. Like, why didn't is it Warner Brothers that's made it? Yeah. So why didn't Warner Brothers like team up with Christopher Nolan, literally to make like PSAs like, hey America, if you want Tenet, then you gotta wear your mask. like I'm sorry, but I actually think that would have actually went viral and been pretty great.
Yeah, the whole thing's been and like almost every other film has just been like just backing away and holding off for another day, and yet they have been defiant this whole time, and it's just blown up in their face.
Yeah. I look at my
and now. Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say now they're like, we're gonna release it in other places and then the U.S. later. And man, I don't know.
I mean, they should. I mean,
Yeah,
I
they-
want it,
they-
obviously, but if we
Well-
can't do it, then why should others?
Yeah. Well, it's just a weird dynamic, especially because of the defiance about having to have it in theaters and having to have it on specific dates, and it was moved back 3 times, and now it's just indefinitely delayed, and the whole thing's just been a big floppy mess.
Yeah, although I will say... Oh, what were you going to say, Anna?
I was just going to say really quickly, I remember going into eons ago, I remember walking into a movie theater and seeing the promotional displays for Mulan, because I think originally Mulan was supposed to come out in like April, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited for Mulan. And then I remember for a while it was like Disney was hesitating on their release date for Mulan, and then it was like Warner Brothers was hesitating on their release date for Tenet, and then they made like the decision, let's just put it in China for now. And Disney was like, we don't really know what we're gonna do with Mulan yet. And it's just like, give me my fucking Mulan already, man. Like,
whoa. Put the knife down.
She's ready. Well, they gave you Artemis Fowl.
Yeah, what more do you want? And Hamilton.
Oh my God. I guess they sure did, huh? And speaking of Disney, I've been waiting 2 years for New Mutants, and they're just going to throw it away on Disney Plus.
So that is the biggest. I know we talk about it a lot, but you know what? For good reason. Way more than Tenet, that for me is the biggest like blunder during this whole COVID theater, pushback, whatever. The fact that we have not seen New Mutants on video on demand yet, or I guess ever, is still one of the craziest things I think that has ever happened.
The only thing I could say for that is that they must be thinking, we've pumped so much money into this damn film, it's going to the theater.
But I don't think, man, see, I'm getting weirdly, the word's not optimistic, but I keep thinking that they think they have a good movie, not because I think they do or they don't, but that's the only thing, because I think Warner Brothers is like, no matter what Tenet is, this is a Christopher Nolan film, which is good in its own respect, even if it's not one of his best or whatever. But, like, for Fox to just hang on to New Mutants for this long during all these whatever, and during COVID not to release it, makes me think that for some weird reason, they think they have a genuine bona fide hit. That is the only thing that makes sense to me. Because X-Men movies are not that profitable compared to like every other superhero movie.
So here's my theory. I think, and to some degree, I think you might have just talked about it, but this is how I feel. I think because it was on the tail end of filming / starting post when the Fox merger was occurring, I think Fox was doing their darndest to not let the Disney claws into their New Mutants as much as they possibly could.
I'm pretty sure that movie sucked.
That's the thing. I don't care if it sucks. I wanted New Mutants the way Fox intended, not the way Disney was going to vomit all over it, which is, I assume, what they did. But then I also heard that Disney kind of rolled backwards a little bit and was letting Fox kind of do their thing when it came to post and like when it came to editing. And like, it's not like they can do more and more reshoots because those kids are young. Maisie Williams probably would have been 25 if they got their way, like with their reshoots.
We talked about this on a previous episode. Anya Taylor-Joy looks 3 years younger when you watch the preview.
Oh God! See, that's the thing.
But
here's the thing. I feel like there's a chance that they had David Ayer's Suicide Squad in the first cut, and they were like, ugh, we don't want that.
I will admit, they have not had very good success with edgy superhero movies that were not explicitly comedies. Obviously, Deadpool was its signifying, factor, and obviously a lot of people liked it. I did
not included.
No, although I weirdly thought the second one was better, but I don't know.
I thought the second one was also good. Okay. But we also didn't get into a huge argument about the second one outside the theaters.
Well, because it was better. But I'm reading Wikipedia really quick, and filming... This is the most trustworthy news source since Fox News. Filming ended in September of 2017. So the Fox merger was, I know obviously it was probably in the works way before we really knew about it, but it still seems like that was like quite a bit after all footage basically had been filmed. I know they did reshoots and whatnot, but essentially the whole Fox merger seemed more like a version of COVID, like something that they couldn't control, but in reality shouldn't have had any real effect on, the actual marketability of this movie, which for all intents and purposes looks like a very mediocre film that I would probably eat up.
Yeah.
Me too, because I just want New Mutants. Like, that's it. That's all I want. Like,
well, according to Wikipedia, the release date is August 28th. So I don't know when that
until
was.
it gets pushed back indefinitely.
Yeah. So, oh boy.
So coming up on this episode here in just a little bit. It's been like 15 minutes and we have not even mentioned the movie that we're going to be talking about. It's okay. We're going to be talking about the 1980s film by Tony Scott, Days of Thunder.
That 1980s movie that came out in 1990.
Was it really 1990? I thought it was 89.
I mean, to be fair, a 1990 film is an 80s film.
Yeah.
I was just giving you shit.
I was like, this movie's really 80s. Sure. Oh, 1990.
Yeah. In cinema, the 80s did not end until about 92.
Yeah. But, so, good call. I look like a stooge. So, the 1990 film, Days of Thunder, which stars Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, and Robert Duvall. And we'll get into that here shortly, but first, second straight episode of A Week in Review. And who wants to go first?
Alex can.
Okay.
That's great.
So, two quick films I want to mention. Last week, I did my first rewatch since the theater, so this was 12 years ago, of the movie Zack and Miri Make a Porno.
Oh.
Yeah, I am not a fan of Kevin Smith, as I have said quite a number of times on this podcast. But I remember liking this when I saw it in the theater, and I enjoyed this also this second time through many years later. And I didn't think it was great, but, especially now where comedies are in such a dire place in cinema, this got plenty of laughs for me, which is really the barometer for a comedy film. And it had a decent storyline, too, even though it's about these people who have this cockamamie scheme of making a porno to get rich. Or at least, yeah, that was good, right?
It was.
Yeah. So there's a lot of interesting scenes here. And I mean, there's very easy things to remember, whether it be the scene where Katie Morgan literally shits on the guy's face, or the interesting sex scene with Seth Rogen and Elizabeth Banks that they think is like the greatest thing ever, and it's just two normal people having sex on top of a sack.
You're really going for all the puns.
Hey. So I will say one scene that has aged terribly, but also I thought was just hilarious, was the scene with Seth Rogen talking with Justin Long and Brendan Routh. Brendan Routh, who was fresh off of that disastrous Superman movie, and Justin Long, who was kind of a little bit popular at this time period.
Oh yeah, that era for sure.
Yeah, he was.
And he eventually went on to make that very interesting film with Kevin Smith called Tusk, which I know Nick saw in the theater.
No.
Oh, really?
Famously, I did not see the movie in the theater, but it was in the theater for the 3 months that I worked at a movie theater, and I have seen the ending to it many times, which is easily, without having seen anything but the ending, the best part of that movie, and also the weirdest thing to watch, sans context. So I've definitely, if you've seen the last 10 minutes of Tusk, you've seen the film Tusk.
I've seen the whole film and I agree with that. So
I just remember for the very first time, like standing there going, "Oh, okay. So A, it takes this long for, gestures at everything on screen, this to happen, and B, thank God, because I don't know who could sit here for 100 minutes and watch this for 100 minutes." So.
So, real quick, the Justin Long, Brandon Routh scene where they are discussing bead and gay porn together. I really do feel like that probably, in the way it is presented, would not happen today, but I still found it hilarious. And also, like I found it also to be, like, not super terrible towards anything, or it didn't like seem overly homophobic, but it also at the same time had some pretty hilarious one-liners and mentions, especially from Justin Long, who is playing it totally serious. So that part, also parts in a coffee shop with Craig T. Robinson, are pretty hilarious.
That's probably the best line of that movie.
Oh, I want he said something about, "I want a coffee black." He said, "You're not going to get it white."
Yeah.
That's pretty great. That's pretty great. So there's a lot of moments here, and then there's things that for sure don't work, and aspects of it that I just squirmed at because it's a Kevin Smith film, and his style is just not for me. But at the same time, definitely some great laugh out loud moments. The other film I want to mention real quick is the also first rewatch I've had since theater of the 2012 film Lincoln from Steven Spielberg, that starred Daniel Day-Lewis, which he won his third of 3 Oscars for, playing President Abraham Lincoln. Two things I'll say about it. The first is that this movie is kind of weird because I found it oddly funny at a lot of moments. And I think that there are performances and line readings that led to that, because it's not a comedy, obviously. It's a movie about Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War.
Laugh riot.
Yeah. But there's a lot of comedic elements, especially in the first hour or so. And there's also a lot of really, I think, pretty witty line readings throughout the entirety of the film that I found quite humorous. So I will say that part of it, and it was definitely not a masterpiece, but I thought it was quite enjoyable. But the thing I wanted to mention most is the extraordinary depth of the cast in this. And this is 8 years old now, but man, the names in this, I was just blown away by the people who kept showing up, because in addition to Daniel Day-Lewis, you had Sally Field playing Mary Todd Lincoln. Then you had also David Strathairn, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, James Spader, Hal Holbrook, Tommy Lee Jones, John Hawkes, Jackie Earle Haley, Bruce McGill, also Tim Blake Nelson, Jared Harris, Lee Pace, Jeremy Strong, who we've seen as Kendall in Succession, and then also Michael Stolberg and Walton Goggins. So I mean, there's just a lot of people here that show up throughout this film, and just watching it, especially in 2020, I'm like, whoa, Walton Goggins, what's he doing here? And a really weird, small performance by James Spader. So interesting casting, definitely very deep, especially in a film that is almost entirely about Daniel Day-Lewis and his portrayal of Abraham Lincoln, obviously giving a very loud performance as per usual, but a good film. I think very good, but also I think I liked it for a lot of reasons that would not be the usual reasons you would think that a Abraham Lincoln film would be good for. So
while you're talking about it, can I ask you two random questions? One to jog my memory, but then another one. So the first question is, because I haven't seen it since the theater, so I just want to make sure I remember it correctly. the ending-ish of the movie with the reveal of the Tommy Lee Jones character is married, right, to
they are
not
together.
married but together or whatever. But
and
that's
she is his housekeeper, and then
Yes.
behind closed doors they are lovers.
Okay, but I just want to make sure. My first question is, because it's been a while, that was like a reveal, right? Like they don't hint at that, they don't do anything until the moment that they show you them in the bedroom, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so now in 2020, I'm curious because I haven't rewatched it. Does that like scene that like if I think back on that scene, like I don't know how I would feel about that. I haven't rewatched the movie, so I can't give any kind of opinion on it. But where that almost seems weirdly, almost trying to shade a sympathy where one is not necessarily earned because it doesn't matter what you do in your private life. It matters what you do for the.
Now, what do you mean about sympathy? I guess.
So Tommy Lee Jones, because it's been a while and I'm not a big history buff, but Tommy Lee Jones plays, what is it, like one of the senators or congressmen that is a holdout, right?
Oh no, he is very strongly for the amendment. He wants to go further on the amendment.
The amendment. All right. Let's break this down really quick.
Okay.
'Cause maybe I'm remembering it wrong.
Okay.
So specifically, what amendment? Not like number, but just what?
He is leading the charge on, other than Abraham Lincoln. He is leading the charge on the 13th Amendment to free slaves, and he also wants to go way further than the language that is in the proposed amendment, and wants to have them be totally free and also have voting rights and everything, because he believes that they should be treated as complete equals, not just be freed from slavery.
Okay, that is why I asked the question, because I definitely remembered it completely wrong. And that's why I was slightly confused when I was remembering it, because it's been so long and I didn't love the movie, but all I remember about him besides the reveal is that he's like portrayed as the antagonist to Lincoln. But that's my own memory, not the actual film.
The only, other than the like overtly group of Southern racists that are led by Jackie Earle Haley, the loudest person in the Senate is played by Lee Pace, who is like constantly shouting when he is talking in session about how terrible these people are, and they're trying to, very much like shit you'd hear right now, unfortunately, but shouting about they're trying to take your rights away, they're trying to ruin the economy, blah, 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 blah. But he has a lot of scenes where he's doing that, where Tommy Lee Jones is pretty much the other side of that, where he is arguing against that, and he's pretty much playing his usual character of a grumpy asshole. So
it's so interesting that if that is the case, which I obviously believe you, then it's like, why is that even like visually depicted as like a reveal that he would be like, why couldn't that be something that's embedded into the entire narrative, woven throughout?
So I actually thought about that, so I'll offer two thoughts of my own.
Great.
Yeah. One is that I have no idea about the historical accuracy of that detail, so I'm not sure about anything regarding it, so I don't really know how to have a true firm thought on that. But the second will be that I feel like there's a potential that this is hard because there's not a good answer to this, because I feel like there's a chance that Steven Spielberg wanted to plant the seed of him doing all this. There's really no good way to say that. Now I'm thinking more about it, because even if you plant the seed that he actually thinks this and then revealing it to the end, that's not good, because that almost takes away from that character, because at least story-wise, that would be saying that the only reason why he feels that way is because he's in love with, I don't know. It's kind of a weird detail. I'll grant you that.
You know what? I feel like, without committing to this, that means we should do an episode on it one day in the future.
Okay.
Because I need to rewatch it, because I definitely thought Tommy Lee Jones was like anti-slavery, which says a lot about how much that reveal affects, I would say, one's memory of a film. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyways, I'll close up by saying this. I remember really liking it in the theater, and I still really liked it. This is pretty much a perfect role for Daniel Day-Lewis, as he has an opportunity to tell all of these bizarre stories, which I feel like it's clearly makes it seem like that's a trait that Abraham Lincoln had, that he always had a story for everything, whatever. But his performance and the way he lands those stories in it is pretty great. Also, this is a pretty early performance from Adam Driver in this movie. I just remember that. Another person who's here. So
yeah, that was like the first thing I think he ever did after the first season of Girls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, I took up a lot of time there talking about
that was my
movies
fault.
that I talked about. Well, yeah, Nick, you kind of helped that along. But Anna, it's your turn. You get to go now.
Great. Okay, so I was debating what to talk about for my weekend review. So I think this counts as, one full answer in my mind. So, I did finish the very first season of the show Succession very recently. That's been talked about off mic before, because I had heard about it from my friends here on the show. And I gotta say, I'm not disappointed. I really, really, really like it. Very seldom do I not enjoy something on HBO, honestly, because that's just the kind of network that they are. But I really do love it. I love the whole cast. Nicholas Braun, Cousin Greg, is my favorite. And I think the show is so good, and I'm so excited for season 2. What's really funny to me, though, and I don't know if it's just me, and this is an extremely weird thing to focus on, but I feel like Kendall only looks good in the tracking shots when the camera follows him. He is a man who wears a suit, and he's really good at that.
Attractive wise?
Yes.
Oh, okay. No, I just wanted to make sure. Okay. Interesting.
So that's but I feel like he's very suited for a role like that,
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of the, I would say, if not close-ups or just very pointed capturing of him is, I think, deliberately trying to make him look like a person wearing the suit in a very false way. This is just not what he's made for.
I was going to say, really? I do think then, I think the show, this was 100% what was going for, but in the second season, we see a different direction. And in the first season, I mostly feel like Kendall's pathetic, and it's exactly what they were trying to show. I remember I think it's the pilot, or maybe the second episode, where he's listening to rap music on his huge...
Oh, that's the pilot.
Okay.
I think that's literally the first scene.
That's his introduction to us.
Yeah, and he's just being a total asshole, and he's getting fired up for this meeting he's having with the guy from... Is it Volter? Is that the name of the company? Yeah. And he's just looks so out of his element, even though he feels confident. It's a really weird spot and very bizarre.
Right. And I was talking about this with my mom, not particularly how he appears visually on camera and the choice of costume, but I think it's in the second or third episode where he tries to video chat with his estranged wife and he's asking her for business advice. And he's like, you're always so good at this kind of stuff, so I thought I would ask you. And I think that's like the first day where Kendall is like acting CEO while Logan is still in the hospital. And my mom was like, look at him. He has no idea what the fuck he's doing. And I was like, but hasn't he been working there for like 3 years?
Well, you see, here's the thing. Nobody knows what's going on, so
yeah,
he fits right in.
I guess so, huh?
Not to mention when you're, daddy's son, you don't really have to know what you're doing because literally you can't do anything wrong in at least some respects.
Right. So, yeah, but I really, really like this show. I'm so excited to see what the future holds. And I know it got renewed for a 3rd season, which is great. I am so excited for the future of this show. And I gotta say, Kieran Culkin is honestly like so good. Like, I know he comes from a family of actors and like, no surprise at that, honestly, but I remember him distinctly from one of my favorite films ever, which is Scott Pilgrim. And I know he had such a small role in that film, but he was so memorable. And I feel like he's used very well in the show. So I really like him a lot too.
Oh, for sure. And I would say season 2 has even better stuff in store for that character. Perfect.
And then my second part for... well, not to immediately cut off Nick, but I'm very excited. I didn't want to lose my train of thought. My second part of my week in review is that I'm exactly halfway through the movie Brightburn, which I think you guys have talked about. Yeah, see, okay. So far, I really like it. I just know it's really long so far, but I will let you know when I'm finished with it.
That was
thank you for the update.
That was one of the worst movies I saw last year.
Oh man.
I'm sorry, Anna, but unfortunately I side with Alex. I think I really should have liked it because I'm kind of a hybrid of I pretty much like anything that's horror-esque. I'm not saying it's like super scary or whatever, but also obviously I'd be down even if I've come around, but anything that's critical of the superhero genre, but it did not work for me.
There was I was about halfway through, there was a fantastic kill of like a shitty uncle or something like that who was in a truck.
Yes,
on
so
the
that's
road.
Exactly where we stopped watching it is right after that scene ended.
Oh, so you saw his face fall apart on the road?
His face breaking at the jaw. Ugh.
Yep, that was awesome. The rest of the movie was really disappointing.
Oh, that's a bummer. I was thinking the deaths would get crazier and crazier. But anyway, I'll wait to see what happens. But it's just so funny because the kid, obviously, the boy is the focus. He's the anti-hero because he's not the antagonist. He's the anti-hero because he's still central to the story. It just makes me wonder. I feel like he would have been the kind of actor to audition for Stranger Things. And then when he got rejected from that, he had a really, really good connection. And now he was in this big budget movie called Brightburn, which comes from the same director as Guardians of the Galaxy. And yet it gets reviews that aren't great from you guys. But so far, I mean, I really like it. So we'll see.
That wasn't directed by James Gunn, was it?
Well, it was certainly written by him.
I think it was produced by him.
Are you kidding me? Oh my god!
Maybe written, but I remember they kept playing up. No, it was written by Mark Gunn and Brian Gunn. Produced by James Gunn. Yeah. No, in the trailers they kept putting James Gunn's name up in very big letters and then in very small letters saying that it was produced by him.
Oh,
another Mortal Engines attempt. Peter Jackson was not involved with this.
Yep.
Anyway, but yeah, so far I really like it. Not too impressed with the main child actor. Hopefully his career will be better from here, but I'll let you guys know how it goes for me.
Please.
So That's my weekend review. A season of a show and half a movie.
Nick, do you have an Elizabeth Banks reference in your weekend review?
Do I? Nope.
It would have completed the trifecta.
I had to think about it for a second. I mean, I watch a lot of shit, but now, unfortunately, I do not. The only thing...
One. Or a Jeremy Strong reference, because Jeremy Strong is in Succession,
yes.
and he was in Lincoln.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Wait a minute. No. I actually did just watch something with Jeremy Strong.
Oh my god. Is there a trifecta?
Hold on.
He's just going to read the name of it, and then he'll move on to what he actually...
I was going to say, I watched it 5 years ago. No, I really did just watch something with Jeremy Strong. Oh, no, it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I did rewatch Maui's Game, and he's in that.
I was going to say, did you rewatch Serenity? Someday we're going to watch that again with Toussaint.
You can.
Oh, Toussaint's got to see it.
I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, he can do that. Oh, man. But anyway, the only thing I want to mention in my weekend review is the fact that I've been catching up on a show that just ended last year, ended on its own terms, and that is the FX series Baskets, starring Zach Galifianakis. I watched the first few episodes when it first came out, and I was not in any way against it by any means. In fact, I thought it was funny or whatever, but I just didn't keep going. Because that's kind of, it takes a lot for me to watch something week to week, to be honest, because I'm always watching a million other things. So, it's over now, so of course now I'm catching up. And I gotta say, I'm kicking myself because I am pretty much in love with it. I think it is one of the best, it's got so many great qualities. One of them is that it's one of the best casted shows. Every single person that comes on screen, whether they have one line or they are a major character, is so weirdly specific in a way that delights me every time we meet a new character, because I now have the utmost faith that they are this weirdly dimensional human being, even if we're never going to learn all their facets and whatnot. It's such a specific form of casting that I just think it's fantastic. But getting a little deeper into the cast, the main turn here by Zach Galifianakis is fantastic. What I like is that it is, on the surface, certainly a representation of what at the time, and probably even still today, that he was known for, as far as being these kind of grown man-child doofuses. But the the TV series, starts with that idea and then really starts to deconstruct it in a very, I think, genuinely emotional way. I mean, literally, it's a show about a failing clown. So it's not like it's trying to hide its metaphors too much. And the fact that he actually plays twins, he plays the main character and his own twin brother, means he gets to do both versions of that kind of manic man-child, whether it's the extremely shouty and effeminate one, or the more kind of quiet, withdrawn, kind of more like Alan in The Hangover and whatnot. But what's terrific is that the more the show goes on, the more that image of that character really gets peeled away. And I know that's just sounds like that's what any good TV show does. But if you take where the show started, which is about a delusional clown who goes to Paris to go to clown school, these are ideas for absurd sketches that you would find in SNL or something, but the show takes them ultra seriously. So at the end of the day, I think the creator of the show, Jonathan Kurzel, calls it a slapstick drama. And I think that's probably the most apt description one could lob at it, which is that it never breaks, as far as there's no like weird dream sequences or anything where it always stays in this weird, absurd wavelength, but it takes its characters' emotions extremely seriously to the point where by the second season, like I'm almost on the verge of tears by every episode because it has crafted all of these characters and even especially so outside of even Zach Galifianakis' character, inner kind of struggles and the way that they're trying to relate to each other. Special shout out to Louis Anderson, who plays Chip, who's Zach Galifianakis, Chip's mother. That on paper is a huge undertaking because the show only was back in started in 2016, and on paper that is a guy in drag playing a role. Like there's nothing more to it until you actually view it and you see that somehow Louis Anderson is not, John Travolta in Hairspray remake. Like, it is a incredibly lived-in performance that feels like only Louis Anderson could play this specific character. And if you read interviews, which I have with Louis Anderson, he says a lot of his facial tics and his performance is actually a tribute to his own mother. And you can completely feel that in his performance. And it's just one of the most touching mother-son relationships I've ever seen on television. But the whole cast is kind of that in a nutshell. It's taking an absurd idea, whether it's a failing clown or even metally speaking, a guy kind of doing the hairspray routine or whatever. Basically going past that first impression and showing you something way more lived in and broken underneath. And it's just spectacular. And I'm only halfway through the second season, and it lasts for 4 seasons, and from what I hear, it pretty much only gets better with every season, so I think it's spectacular, myself included. I don't think it got its due when it was on, and I genuinely think it announces Zach Galifianakis as a talent, even if most people are not going to witness it. So I just want to put that out there. If you have not watched Baskets, I highly encourage that.
Right on, man. Ooh. Good stuff. So, this episode is going to be surrounding the movie Days of Thunder, which I mentioned a short while ago. But this is a film that involves NASCAR, so it is a sports film. And it was released in 1990, even though I said it was an 80s film. And this film surrounds a young hotshot stock car driver who gets his chance to compete at the top level. That is saying almost nothing, but there you go. So the film, as I mentioned, was directed by Tony Scott and features Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, and Robert Duvall. Also featured here are Randy Quaid and Michael Rooker, and we have performances by Carrie Elways, John C. Reilly, Fred Thompson, and some other people along the way who you may have seen at other points throughout the history of film. So, you guys want me to go first, since I was the one who suggested this movie?
Yes, but before you go, also, while Alex was mentioning other actors in the film, this film features the first performance by esteemed character actress Margot Martindale. Did you guys notice her? She's the timekeeper on the track in like the very
in the very beginning, right?
And what?
I said in the very beginning, like the first.
In the very, very beginning. I think that's the only part where she shows up. But apparently, this is her first role ever, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Esteemed character actress Margot Martindale. So that's it.
Hell yeah!
Hell yeah!
Right on. So, I've had a weird history with NASCAR because my dad watched NASCAR occasionally when I was growing up, and then he watched it quite a bit when NASCAR had its major boom in the mid to late 90s. So I watched it often in the mid to late 90s.
Was that basically the Jeff Gordon boom?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to know. Yeah.
I mean, NASCAR really hit its stride in the Jeff Gordon era, which was highlighted by early on in his era, his feud with Dale Earnhardt. And then obviously there were a lot of things that happened in the 5 to 6 years that NASCAR was extremely popular. And then we see the end of that when Dale Earnhardt's death in 2001, and then everything that followed, and it kind of is still watched by a lot of people, but is certainly not what it was in the mid to late 90s. Anyways, so this film was something that I saw early on in my lifetime. I wasn't really little, so I didn't grow up with this or anything like that. But I watched this when I was probably around 12 or so for the first time. And I will say I've enjoyed this every single time I've watched it. And I feel like I've enjoyed it for different reasons every time I've watched it in my lifetime, depending on what year I've watched this. I personally think this film is great, and it's not a masterpiece or anything like that, but this is super enjoyable, fun, camp at points, also has these weird, serious storylines throughout it that I feel like actually kind of work at some points. Obviously, some of them don't. And then there are so many other things here that are just so uncomfortable and awkward. But I feel like those are a hallmark of 80s films, especially in this particular film, since it's an 80s film that revolves heavily around NASCAR. This hits a lot of really weird notes, and I just really like it a lot, actually. Even though Tom Cruise is a star here, and I think he definitely has some good moments in this, I feel like he is not the best part of this movie. And the three characters that I really like in this are, well, I do quite like Nicole Kidman, so she's one of them, even though she's not great, but I think she's still giving a pretty solid performance in this, even under a very bizarre situation. I think that her character and that way the character is treated would pretty much never happen in current cinema, but here I think she's giving a pretty strong performance, and obviously had good on-screen chemistry with Tom Cruise as they eventually went on to be married and then divorced and whatever. But I like Nicole Kidman a lot, but I think Robert Duvall is fantastic in this, actually. He finds this really weird spot to be the charming asshole that is always something that is very fun to see on screen, while also definitely being a NASCAR good old boy in pretty much every sense of that term. And also, too, he has this really dark storyline in the background about how he was the crew chief that was under the death of somebody, and he abruptly left the sport when there was an investigation into it. And he only comes back when it's promised that there will not be an investigation. And then he almost leads Tom Cruise to the exact same fate. And there's a lot of frightening things there, which I think actually gets a payoff in the really confrontational scene between Tom Cruise and Robert Duvall right before the final race in this film. So there's a lot about that I really like. I really like Michael Rooker. I think he's great as the original villain of Rowdy Burns. What a great NASCAR name, by the way. Michael Rooker, who's definitely rose back to prominence here in the last decade, mostly from Guardians of the Galaxy, but also from other things. He's giving a pretty awesome performance as the main antagonist early on. And also, I think Randy Quaid is perfectly casted and is pretty fantastic, and also delivers a wonderful line reading of, "You guys are looking like a monkey fucking a football out there."
We all know what that looks like, so.
Oh, boy. Also, too, really random use of fuck in a sexual connotation in a PG-13 movie, but there you go.
It was the 90s.
It's so weird that you say this was a PG-13 movie, because I will admit, until you said that, I assumed it was rated R, and not for any specific reason. It just has that weird swagger of like an adult drama that just does not get made anymore. So anyway,
I wouldn't have assumed it was PG-13 myself.
Yeah, well, there you go. Apparently, anything was getting past them at this point. So, anyways, I did quite like Randy Quaid, and I liked a lot of performances. Really early performance by John C. Reilly here, playing a pretty solid small role. But I really did like Robert Duvall, and I really did like Michael Rooker. And I love the detail that we get towards the end of this film of Cole Trickle, which is Tom Cruise's character, ending up driving Rowdy Burns's car in the Daytona 500 to defeat his new rival, who took his old car, which is Carrie Elway's character of Russ Wheeler, who's a total dickhead, who also consistently describes what he's going to do people as putting them in the wall, which I feel like is totally a reference to saying putting people on the wall. I don't know why. He just says it too many times, and just every time I'm just like, that seems really creepy. So I've obviously got a lot of thoughts on this, and I've seen this numerous times and always enjoy it. But I always think this is a lot of fun. This is the first time I've revisited in probably 5 years, and I still liked it quite a lot. I think it's actually aged pretty well, and it definitely has an 80s vibe and definitely is a throwback movie to that era. And not saying that that era was good or better or anything like that, because it certainly was not, especially with a lot of the dialogue and the actions and the creepy sexual things that are happening in this movie between Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. But it definitely is a nice snapshot of that era in cinema and NASCAR married together. So I guess I will leave it there for now and let one of you two go next.
Anna, you want to go or you want me to go?
I can go.
All right.
So I was looking forward to watching this film for the first time. I didn't know anything about it other than Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman are in it. And this is the film where they met before they got married. I honestly didn't even know it was about NASCAR. But I know this was like also during Tom Cruise's height of fame, like shortly after Top Gun. That was also a Tony Scott film, and I love Top Gun. So, yeah, I did like this film. I thought it was pretty good. I also really like sports dramas. So when I found out this was a NASCAR film, that kind of set my expectations for me there. As we move forward, granted, this was my first viewing as well. There were some things that I definitely went over my head, or I wasn't paying attention, or what. But there were some things where I was like, oh, that doesn't make sense to me. It didn't make sense to me. Now it makes sense to me. Like, I'm just going to start my opening thoughts with this, just so you guys can like see how I feel as a first time viewer. Nick, I don't know if you've seen this film more than once. My guess is that you have. So in the very beginning, when Cole is like sizing up the stock car and like talking about how good he can drive it, even though he's never driven that type of car before, the context that I got out of it from that scene, and then also the scene in the bar where he's like, I don't know the first thing about race cars, man. I just don't have the vocabulary. I understood it as, oh my God, Tom Cruise has never driven a car before in his life. So that's the type of viewing I got from this. So that probably wasn't the most authentic response to have. I feel like you guys are rolling your eyes behind your computers as I say this, because I'm laughing at my own stupidity. But anyway.
Wait, are you saying Tom Cruise, the actor, Or
no, the character.
Okay,
like Cole Trickle had never driven a car before in his life, and I was like, well, then why the fuck are they hiring him to be a part of this team?
No, I will admit right now that actually, first of all, I had not seen this movie before we did this. This is one I never caught. So I was with you in the first 20 minutes where I had to reorient myself as to what kind of a rising star he was going to be, and I did not know it was going to be the I don't know anything about cars. I just know about how to drive, which doesn't make any sense.
Well,
right.
Well,
I was like, well, what the fuck? Did you know how to change an air filter, dude? Like, come on.
Well, so he's never driven a stock car before. He's driven like IndyCar before. So in terms of the differences between the weight in the car and the way that it moves and the way that it operates, obviously in terms of, I believe he had driven a car before, and he'd come from IndyCar, so a different type of racing beforehand. But yes, there is quite weird things happening with what you're talking about, Hannah, though, because he's talking about wedge and those kind of things. I have no idea what we're talking about, which I'm not huge in racing, even though I've watched quite a bit of NASCAR in my life. But I was like, man, you should know about that, if.
Okay, see, I'm glad I'm not the only person where like some of those things just went over my head. And also I think it's a combination of, I feel like the sound editing just isn't that great sometimes, and like also the actors just weren't directed to like be as projecting and as enunciating, because sometimes I feel like I just can't understand anything they're saying in this film. But yeah, okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one with this sentiment. So yeah, so also I think even though there are like issues with, things that Alex has pointed out before, like the weird sexist situations that happen, I am pro Nicole Kidman's character in this film, because I don't think I've ever seen her in a film with her natural hair and her natural accent. Oh my gosh. And I think this was also like really, really early on in her career too. So like I haven't seen too many movies where like she was this young. And what a queen. That's all I have to say. Like style.
She pretty much in everything I've seen, other than that terrible Baz Luhrmann Australia movie, she mostly has an American accent in almost everything else I've seen. But
yeah,
now, like I think she's a pretty great character in this movie, especially playing a doctor in a situation where she is, at least originally, being treated in the first time as a possible prostitute when he meets her, when he's, with it sort of for the first time. And of course she is a doctor and she is very much trying to keep everything professional. And then he overcomes her with his slew of flowers and charm. I don't know. Yeah. So that storyline is very dated and terrible. But in terms of her performance, I agree. I think she's quite good and feels very cozy in her own skin in this film.
Oh, for sure. I certainly think she's an actor that's a natural, and she's not a person who's like trying too hard. And also not super important to the film, but I like how in certain shots you can tell that Nicole is just taller than Tom, because that's just the way it is. So those are my opening thoughts.
At one point he asked her how tall she is.
See, okay, that was so weird. I feel like that line just didn't like what did we get from that line other than Tom Cruise asking her that? Because I thought that was set up for like their eventual date, right? Like what was the point of that? I didn't get it.
That's supposed to be, well, I'm going to let Alex answer that if he has an answer.
About what? Sorry, I'm kind of confused about what you're asking.
About why he asked her how tall she was.
This was before they officially go out on their date.
Yeah, I feel like it was two parts. I think it was an in-joke to her being taller than him. And then the second part of that would be that, I don't know if this film is smart enough to think this, but He's clearly has no idea how to talk to anyone, specifically women, so he's just asking anything about them, like, how tall are you? Like, I don't know.
Okay, do you want to hear my thing as far as why I thought he asked that, which I also don't think is what it was, but when he asked it before we cut to their date, I thought it weirdly had to do with stock car racing, because I thought height. No, but I thought height and weight.
No. I'm laughing because I think it's you're on track.
Like, I mean, for a film about that or whatever, and there is technically with stock car racing, there's a height and a weight, at least consideration or whatever. So I thought he was trying to I thought it was going to cut to them in a car, like on the track or whatever. And then when it didn't, I was like, okay.
See, that's what I assumed too. I was like, oh, there has to be some cute racing date he has planned for her, and then that's not the case.
No, that was the only time there was a racing date is when he
with Michael Rooker. Yeah.
Oh no, I was gonna say when he's on the brink of kidnapping her, when he decides to, he has to have an in-date race with a taxi cab driver.
Yeah.
And she just continuously is screaming, "Let me out of the car, Cole! Let me out of the car!"
Oh my god, I thought that was so funny when she said that.
That was funny. That's a psychopath taking her on a joyride.
Yeah.
Talking about.
She totally owned him and just screamed at him in the middle of the street exactly what he deserved in that point of the film.
Hey, you know what? He just racing is so embedded in him that he just lives racing. Sorry. It's just so... Oh, man. The Michael Rooker scene is so great because it's so stupid and so 80s. And I love the cutback between that and Fred Thompson and Randy Quaid in the restaurant, and him just being like, if you can't control your drivers, how can you control or something like that, control your race cars? I don't know. And oh, boy, what a terrible scene, but also wonderful.
I guess I will go.
Yes.
All right.
You would be the last person to go.
Hell yeah. My opening thoughts is that I thought this was pretty good. I actually have watched a couple Tony Scott movies this year that I'm not caught up with previously, so it might be the year of Tony Scott and a few other random directors that I've been catching up on. But I am a sucker for this era of Tom Cruise where he got to play a cocky asshole who's young, hot shit who knows way more than his older counterpart, but in reality he's got to slow down just a little bit and learn a thing or two about life. And this was certainly an entry into that genre, and for good reason. It's a winning formula. Not Formula One, because this is stock car racing, am I right? But this movie... but this movie...
Can I say really quickly?
You can.
My favorite line from this movie, and again, I love Robert Duvall in this. I think he's fantastic. But the worst line of this movie, for sure, is when he says, "There's nothing stock about a stock car."
Yeah, I'm like, well, that's kind of the whole point of the goddamn sport, but okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
I know nothing about racing or cars, but when that was like, you sure about that? Oh, man. Anyway, no, I'm with you there. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. I think Tony Scott is a great director, actually. Even when he makes a bad movie, which this is not, but even when he does, he has a vitality to him that is always, I think, fascinating from a scene-to-scene basis. And I think one thing that Tony Scott does so well, and I told Alex this previously, but is that he was, unfortunately, R.I.P., but was so great at taking some of the biggest personalities in Hollywood and harnessing that into a very kind of blue-collar potboiler adult drama, because you have his movies with him and Tom Cruise, like this one or Top Gun, where, one is a plane and another is a car, but the idea is that, it's a quote-unquote man's job and someone's got to do it for the honor or whatever. And Tom Cruise somehow always toes that line in a Tony Scott movie of being a cocky asshole, but also weirdly kind of being dressed down by the world around him in a at least realistic enough way to get you through to the finish line. But another person, obviously, Tony Scott did this with, and probably maybe the only other person that he did it with better was with Denzel Washington in some of the thrillers that they teamed up with. But Tony Scott just is so good at kind of painting this these universes in which most people are not privy to. In Top Gun, it was the Air Force, and in NASCAR, or I should say in this movie, it was NASCAR, because even if you're a fan, you don't get to sit down there, you don't get to actually, be present for the culture that happens behind the scenes and so on and so forth. And yet he always portrays it in this very kind of down-to-earth way that is always kind of, I think he just, and I don't mean this as a pejorative, but like he just makes like the best dad movies ever, like it's the kind of movies where my own father, grew up watching just before he had children, and was like, this is how men should be, they know their trade and they're bedding women, but the movie's never like I'm being slightly whatever, but also it's like the movie's never gross about any of that either. It's weirdly prudish when it comes to sex, and so is like Top Gun even, and so it's like this weird platonic, almost suburban fantasy of what these cultures look like in a way that's palatable, and if not attainable to people who are never going to be in these positions whatsoever. So it's that salt of the earth thing that he really lends to it. And I think Days of Thunder is another great example of it. It's not my favorite in either Tony Scott's filmography or even in this kind of subgenre that he was able to carve out, but it's by no means bad at all. It's pretty great. I thought, as Alex mentioned, it's very well casted. Pretty much the entire bench here is just a great presence every time anyone's on the scene, whether it's Randy Quaid as the car dealer, financial supporter, sponsor, whatever, or even Robert Duvall, who I'm always hit or miss on. He's actually fantastic in this. And that scene of him and Cruise in the barn, I think, right?
That was fucking legit.
It is, and
that was real.
It is great, and that's it's what I love about Tony Scott is like Tony Scott creates a movie that basically always tries to lead up to that scene. Like the one scene where the two guys don't know the meaning of homoeroticism and just go at each other for the sanctity and the honor of being, whatever their role is in their profession and or their relationship to one another. Whereas like Michael Mann is like, no, I gotta make a movie that's that scene for the rest of the movie, like for in the entire 2 hours you're watching this. So I think that's why Tony Scott became a little more famous. But that scene in the barn is fantastic because it's such a great example of when sports movies like say nothing and everything at the same time, because when they keep going back and forth, they are in no way being emotionally like revealing, but that's the entire premise of that scene. It's like they keep saying, you're scared, no, you were scared, and it's it works solely because of the dance being performed between the actors and Tony Scott's direction. Like on paper, that's just one of the worst like written scenes ever, but you would never think that when you're watching it, because it's just so well performed, and the way it happens kind of under the basque of those blue lights that Scott favored so much, it's just gorgeous. But I thought throughout that this was very entertaining. I actually thought my only real criticism before I throw it out to everybody was that I actually thought it was more slight, I guess, slighter than I thought it would be when it came to its depiction of NASCAR in general. I guess I obviously did not expect, like, I mean, I knew it was a fictitious person and whatnot. It wasn't going to, like, it's not a biopic or anything like that. But it does let its character drama, which is not bad by any means, but certainly not revelatory, it does let the character drama overshadow what I do think is its best asset, which is the mundane kind of depictions of NASCAR garages and office, workroom conversations and whatnot. And I kind of wish there was a little more of that. But overall, it's hard to complain when everybody is kind of giving their all. And frankly, when the movie is as entertaining as it is, it's a weird movie where it's like, I have no real complaints. It's just, it almost makes me wish there was a 3-hour version, basically.
I will say this before we talk more about this film and specific parts of it, but I will say that I feel like this is actually kind of an outlier where you actually have a sports league letting you show some dirty laundry about their sport. I don't think any professional sports league in this era that we currently live in would ever let anything like this happen.
Yep.
And we talked, I think me and Nick, I think we talked about it maybe a week or two ago about the movie Major League, how that had the actual branding of the MLB sports teams in it, and it totally was not what they would want to have out there as their image in any way. And I think this is kind of a bit of the same, even though of this era, like, I think this is pretty damn spot on for what this was, and actually was probably a little bit restrained. So I don't know. I feel like a lot of the scenes, especially when we have like the commissioner of NASCAR meeting with them after they've had their doctor's visit where they're having their brain scans and everything. He's like, if you touch your cars again, I'm going to black flag you. It's like, oh, okay.
I will say I'm in complete agreement, and I think that's maybe the one, or where I would say I can kind of pull at the thread of, like, really the only flaw in this movie for me, which is that, like, it's so weird to have the Nicole Kidman character be directly tied into the politics of what NASCAR is essentially doing in this movie and what the racers are experiencing, because it's hard to separate the two. But then at the end of the day, the movie favors Nicole Kidman as the love interest, and that starts to overshadow a lot of the, I would say, medical fudgery or whatever that is somewhat insinuated throughout the entire picture. And I feel like that's where the movie is slightly at odds with each other.
Yeah. Well put. Yep. So, first thing I definitely wanted us to talk more about was the Nicole Kidman Tom Cruise relationship, specifically the parts of this film that were extremely awkward. I mean, when you talk about the females in this film, it's not good.
That's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, we have the scene after Cole wins his first race where it is pretty elaborate, where their trailer gets pulled over by a whole police unit of both men and women.
I texted you that the weirdest thing, and this is completely true because I genuinely had not seen it before, nor had I, like, caught parts of it or whatever on TV. But while I was watching the scene in which they were pulled over, and then it was revealed that, that they were like a stripper or whatever, which is weird because then it's like, why send a dude? Like, anyway. Yeah. But I was like, to Alex, I'm texting him and I'm like, wow. I'm like, this stripper escort service is so elaborate. This is going to have ramifications. And then I was like kind of kidding. And then sure enough, that's actually followed up on.
And here's the thing. Even though that is a pretty gross scene that we have, that's the payoff for the escort who is grabbing his dick and then saying, "Is he gonna use his weapon?" Earlier on, I actually think that, especially because of the guys in that scene and then the laughter that we get after he grabs Nicole Kidman's hand and puts it on his junk when he's clearly not totally with it. I actually think that scene is pretty great. And I really love it because of Robert Duvall's, I don't know about tone, but just his actions in that when like Tom Cruise looks at him and just says, nope, this isn't that. and he just goes forward with it. And it is just like, it goes all the way. Like, I feel like a lot of times, not that exact scene, but a scene like that would go halfway and like have someone step in, but they just let them just do it. And then they just start giggling in the background. And yeah, it's obviously bad and problematic, but I feel like that's one thing about this film that lands, for me at least, is that this is unapologetically this era of film and this era of NASCAR married together. And I feel like that kind of scene would have maybe not happened exactly like that, but could have totally went down in that way. But man, there's so much happening with the female characters, specifically Nicole Kidman, whether it's that or the flowers and that weird thing where he asks for her address and it's very available. And how did he get the flowers in there? I mean, I don't know. I have so many questions. And there's just a lot going on that is just, ugh.
So that's a really good point that you bring up. I mean, not only just like the scene that we get with the stripper, but like kind of everything about the interactions between Cole and Dr. Lewicki. Forgive me, I forget what her first name is. But I thought the stripper scene, like with the, them getting pulled over, I thought that was just really bizarre. But I also didn't get the joke at first, because when the gal like opens her shirt and reveals she's a stripper, I was like, wait a minute, is that Nicole Kidman? Because I don't get it. And then like when Nicole Kidman actually shows up and Tom Cruise thinks it's the stripper, I was like, Tom Cruise, that's not the stripper. That's obviously a doctor. It took me like a few scenes later to be like, oh, it's because he thought what was happening. And so even I got bamboozled by like that whole thing.
Man,
but
let me tell you, some male writer in the late 80s thought that was just the greatest thing they've ever put together.
When he came up with that, I bet he was like, this is it. This is going to be...
hell yeah.
This is it.
This is timeless.
Yeah. And then, I mean, going to your point of like, oh, her address is just available. I feel like a hospital just wouldn't readily give out that information to like even a former patient, let alone just anybody randomly calling in.
You're talking about Cole Trickle. Okay. One of the greatest racers of all time.
I was gonna say he gets his man or his woman. I mean, it doesn't matter. He's determined.
Well, still, it's just so bizarre because
no, I'm kidding. He's obviously a terrible person.
Right, but even so, it's just like that's grounds for like a stalker situation. And like, even if I watched this film like 7 years ago, prior to Me Too becoming the situation it's been,
I would have been bad then too.
Right, even back then I would have been like, damn, that's like definitely stalker situation. And then to order thousands and thousands of dollars worth of flowers and balloons to her apartment, Jesus Christ, that's like, if she wasn't interested, that's like fucking harassment, basically.
And even if she is interested, that's not cute. Like, I think that was a trope in movies from this era of like, oh my God, you're great. I mean, we even see it in Wolf of Wall Street when Leonardo DiCaprio sends Margot Robbie a room full of flowers. Like, that's not cute. I don't think that is a stalker.
It's also like incredibly wasteful. Like,
yeah, where's she gonna plant those? I said, where's she going to plant
be
those?
Dead in a week. I mean, come on.
Exactly. It's just, it seems very wasteful, and like even the gesture, it's like it's all about the gesture, like when we view it from the outside. But like, what a pain in the ass that must be to like just look around and be overwhelmed at all this shit you didn't ask for.
Yeah. Now that you mention it, we never see those flowers again. Like,
no, that's because we don't. Okay, so I was gonna say, like, well, we never see her apartment again. I assume when they like do it, that's like at her apartment, right?
It would have been great if there were just dead flowers everywhere in her apartment. That would have been fantastic.
But yeah, that's a good point. We never see any of those again. We never see the bear inside its own balloon again. So yeah. But I do agree with both of you gentlemen that I also am not the biggest fan of the way females are portrayed. But overall, I do like Dr. Lewicki's character a lot because she is one of the people who tells Cole, like, you're going to get yourself killed if you keep behaving this way. And I, like, you guys bring up a really good point about the way the sport itself is portrayed, because I definitely believe, I'm sure it's still part of the culture in NASCAR today. I don't think that part has changed at all, where race car drivers don't go to anybody's funeral, and they have a stubbornness about like wanting to go to the doctor. Not to say that that's like across the board, that's how they behave. But I can definitely believe it, especially with Michael Rooker's character's ignorance about wanting to go to his follow-ups. And then lo and behold, he needs brain surgery.
So here's the only thing I will say, and I mean, I can't speak for what drivers are in this era in terms of their feelings on death and funerals and all that. I'm sure there's still quite a bit of that, what you just described, Anna. But the sport of NASCAR, after Dale Earnhardt's death in 2001, underwent a pretty large transformation in terms of trying to be more cognizant of safety and the idea of changes in the helmets, changes in the way that helmets and drivers are situated in cars, changes in walls on tracks and having them not be as rough. So when you crash into them, it's not just a hard crash into a hard wall and you're left in a terrible position. Because in reality, like, deaths were a common occurrence that was oddly accepted in any kind of racing, including NASCAR, for many years up until late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, there were a slew of deaths in NASCAR in the 90s and up until Dale Earnhardt's passing in 2001. So it was definitely a real thing of the danger and the idea of people letting their lives be on the line every time they went to work. And that's such a weird difference from nowadays where, like, drivers get injured and drivers have serious injuries. And earlier this year, people were concerned that a driver did die during an event. He did not die. He just ended up with a bit of an injury, and he's actually back driving in NASCAR now. But I think it's certainly a different climate now than it was when this film came out.
Well, I mean, it was the days of thunder, not the days of funder.
Okay, Nick. Oh, boy.
I also meant to ask both of you, now that Nick brings that up, is Days of Thunder like an expression in racing, or is that just like
no? That's like just at least I thought
that's nothing.
Just 80s,
sounded cool,
tacky shit. Yep.
Okay. All right. I just wasn't sure. I don't know anything about racing. So.
It'd be kind of cool if it was, but it's not.
It's kind of like Top Gun is technically about the Air Force, and I'm not saying that they're not weapons in a way, but they're not ever like they're mostly doing weird drills throughout that entire movie to the point where maybe you should call it Top Plane, but anyway.
Oh man, that's great. What did you guys think about the rivalry that we see between Cole and Rowdy Burns throughout this, obviously it comes full circle in the end, when he ends up taking over his race team, which is kind of a weird situation, and then beating his new rival, who is played by Robin Hood Man in Tights, and definitely an interesting thing. I will say, too, real quickly, I love when he has his tires changed after the race is over and then goes out and intentionally crashes him, both because that is super silly and ridiculous, and at the same time, great because Carrie Elway's reaction when he sees him, he's just like, ah! It's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, Anna.
No, Nick, you go ahead.
Oh, my goodness. I was just going to say that I was slightly surprised about halfway through when I realized the trajectory of, Cruz and Rooker's friendship, whatever, was that how much Talladega Nights was cribbing from, the only other NASCAR movie. So, and not in a bad way, just so that was even... Anyway, but there's a lineage of that.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Anna?
So I'm glad that Alex proposed that question about the rivalry because, they make it pretty clear, in the beginning parts of this film, that they are indeed rivals. That's what I liked about this film a lot, is that it doesn't really waste any time cutting to the chase. And then when it culminates to them also racing each other in wheelchairs in the hospital, which was just so
that's great,
painfully and also hysterical, where I had to be like, what's happening? And then it gets to them racing the rental cars on the beach, and then I actually really do like that they become friends. But there was I think there was a moment where amongst all of that, I had to think to myself, wait a minute, aren't they rivals? Because I think they start to get maybe a little bit chummy before they actually get over that. But I also will say, when Carrie Elwes, it's he's introduced, I think he does a really good job giving off that evil energy. I think he's actually very good at that. I think he's one of those natural actors too. But yeah, I mean, I kind of like the shift that we see between those two people in relation to Cole.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes full circle with Cole Trickle throughout the film, as he is the young hotshot who has a rival early on, and then just one season later, it's on the opposite end of the spectrum where they're literally driving the other's cars, and I don't know. There's just something about that I just love, and that he ends up winning the Daytona 500 the following year, driving Rowdy Burns' car.
Yeah,
I just love that. It's great.
I'm with you in the sense that I actually really like that storyline, mostly because of the actors, not because of the way it's set up, because I think that's the one thing about it, is that it feels super rushed. But the actors sell the hell out of it, to the point where they also don't even overplay it either. I mean, when they're talking about it in the hospital, it's kind of that interesting pragmatic approach where it's I mean, I do think they actually do grow to like each other, but technically speaking, Michael Rooker's character is talking from a place of practicality and saying yeah, I really need this because I need to provide for my family, and you'd be kind of a dick to say no. It's just kind of whatever, and the begrudging respect that crops up between the two, I think, is earned, but definitely on the strength of the performances.
Well, also, too, in that same vein, we have Randy Quaid's character, who's goes on a similar path throughout the film, where he's trying to start a race team. He tries to get Harry, Robert Duvall's character, out of retirement after he's retired because of an incident that happened where his driver died. He coerces him out of retirement, gets him to have a guy who's inexperienced in the car. Then on the first sign of having success, he, well, I guess not exactly, but he has a dual team then after Russ Wheeler takes over for Cole when he's inactive because of his injuries. And then obviously there's a lot of tension there, but then he weirdly is playing both sides like Severus Snape in a way. Like it's very odd where he's just like, oh yeah, I gave you guys the engine. Go push that car. And it's like, what? Why would you? Even the NASCAR officials like, you can't do that. This is a very odd situation. And then I do love Randy Quaid in this movie a lot. And I think I'm a little, especially watching a movie like this, and me and Nick just watched Hard Rain like a month ago. I think he's great in that as well. And I'm a little sad that he went way off the deep end.
This era of Randy Quaid is genuinely great. Not because he gives emotionally searing performances or anything like that, but he is exactly the archetype that a lot of directors were going for in what they were casting him in during this era, for sure.
Yeah, and again, I'm a little sad that he's went totally off the deep end, has reached the point a long time ago of never coming back. But that one part late in the film where Cole is being put up on people's shoulders, which is really weird for a race car movie. But they just one shot of him be like, I don't know. That was great.
Well, he's tiny, so they like to put him up there. I can make that joke because I'm small.
And then they took Nicole Kidman and got all 9 feet of her up there next to him, so it was all good. Anyways, also really quick, I definitely wanted to mention this. Nick, I sent you the screenshot of this earlier today, but the ending freeze frame of this film after the actual literal running between Robert Duvall and Tom Cruise, which must have been awkward to film because obviously Tom Cruise is known for his bizarre running in films, and Robert Duvall's already in this film was old as fuck, so he must have been running at a third of the possible speed that he could run at to have that look like they were next to each other.
I'm just picturing the first time they shot that, and then Scott just, cut. Hey, Tom, come here for a second. Listen, could you lag behind a little bit? We need it for. Oh, yeah, sure, yeah, you got it, Tony. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, and then they have to do it 50 more times because he just cannot do it until eventually.
And the fact that it ends on that freeze frame and they both have this I just farted smile on their face.
Well, Talladega Nights ends on a freeze frame, doesn't it?
I
thought
know.
Maybe it's not a freeze, but no, I thought I remember
them getting in the car with Gary Cole and going.
Oh wait,
to
but
Applebee's.
I think there is a freeze frame after the race. I thought the
that
whole.
Could be.
I think the whole we belong together thing where they're running. I think at least, if not ends on a freeze frame, utilizes a freeze frame. I could be wrong, but anyway. But that scene reminded me of that a parallel there at least. But yeah, no, that you sent me that text, and I had forgotten to tell you that I had not finished the movie. Not that was a spoiler or anything, but I got that picture, and the reason why I never texted you back because I was like, oh. Well, clearly I need to finish this movie to understand the deep context here, because I was like, what is going on here?
Especially because they're both wearing mellow yellow garb in it.
Yeah, and Tom Cruise is kind of in blackface a little bit. I'm only partially joking. How does he get that much grease from just driving a car?
Okay, in fairness, I think that is entirely accurate of that era. Okay. Because the drivers in the cars
all
those
electric
days,
now.
Well, in that era when they didn't have a full mask around their face, they did get a lot of grease and whatever from the engine. So it was really common for them to look like that after a race for drivers. So I think it's actually pretty accurate. Yeah.
It's just a little racially charged for my taste. I don't know.
I mean, there is because watching, and one of the things that led me to even think about presenting this as an episode was the idea of like the 5th or 6th shot of this film is just a close up on the Confederate flag, and I was like, oh, didn't even think about that at the time, but man, that's not looking good.
Yeah, but that should really be edited out.
Speaking of like shots in this film, not necessarily the Confederate flag shot, because honestly I didn't notice that. Yikes. So there are certain shots that
look at that pretty flag.
There are certain shots that, like, to me, I really like, just because that era of 90s branding and merchandising is just unlike anything that had been out at the time, and is not really something that's done now, just because like technology has improved so much. But like the way all of those sponsorship logos look next to each other during one of those setup shots for one of the races, it's like the Coke logo looks like the logo from like the 80s, 90s, and like I don't know, Mellow Yellow looked the way it does.
Yeah. Oh, the Hardee's logo is so good.
Yeah, and the Hardee's logo, like just things like that just really stuck out to me, and I was like, oh, it's going to be this kind of movie. Like, bring it on, man. So I thought were super cool.
So
I think a lot of those were stock images, though, right?
They were.
You son of a bitch.
Oh my god.
Oh,
I just.
You're terrible. Another thing I will mention that I love is both the main theme of this film and the score throughout this. I love. It's great. It's just like Emily was getting so pissed at me earlier this week because every like now and then I'd be like down.
So you say that, but now I'm envisioning like it's 3 a.m. and you're just laying in bed doing that for no reason.
No, it was more happening like at the dinner table, and she'd be like, "Just shut up and eat your spaghetti."
Oh my god!
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's about right. Yeah. No, like this is. I feel like that's I mean, obviously things like Harry Potter can do, but like I feel like every movie in this era had its own theme song. And I love that this has this,
it's a product of the 80s movies having their song.
For sure. I just love it here. Like that music just fits in with race car driving, especially in this vein. And I just every time I watch it, I'm just like, ooh, I love it. So you guys want to go to final ratings?
Sure.
Okay. So, who wants to go first?
I'll go first. We'll go backwards. How about that? Me and
okay.
You? All right.
Okay.
I will take the baton first and say that I very much enjoyed this. I feel like the only thing that was missing was just a little more. And I mean that in a very vague and general sense, just a little more of everything, like just a little more of the NASCAR, salt of the earth mundaneness, a little more to Nicole Kidman's character, just a little more across the board, and I feel like this would be a stone cold classic, but short of that, it's still a good movie that holds up. So, I mean, that in and of itself is obviously a pretty big feat, I think, for considering the cast of this era and the subject matter. So I think it's pretty good. I definitely think it's like if you were gonna do a Tony Scott study, so to speak, this is very emblematic of what he was good at, for sure. And I give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. And that's all I got.
Cool. All right. I give this film 3 out of 5 stars. I think this is a very well done sports drama. I mean, there's very little that I didn't like about it. I feel like, now correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like this is a movie that's on TV all the time. If not, it's okay. So
I literally saw it, like part of it on TV a couple weeks before Alex suggested it, and that was the first time I had actually caught any part of any movie on TV in a while.
Okay, all right. It definitely gives me that vibe for some reason. That it's just something that programmers can put in, and you can pick it up at any point, and you just know that this movie is about NASCAR. I think I think that the way this film gets straight to the point, and it moves the characters along in the way that you are really needing them to, and then there's a love story, and it's not too clunky. It's like Nicole Kidman isn't just the love interest; she's also the doctor making sure these people don't die. Like was mentioned earlier, I do appreciate that this is a film that brings attention to the issues that arise in the sport pre the death of Dale Earnhardt Sr., like was mentioned earlier. And this just really captures like late 80s, early 90s drama, sports drama, basically. I really could just take any movie like this and just straight up go for it, because that's just how much I really like movies about sports. And I do think this was a really good era for Tom Cruise too, like before Mission Impossible, and also before his nose job. I really do like this era for him. And I think it's cool to see like early Nicole Kidman too. But yeah, 3 out of 5 for me. I really like this a lot.
Right on. So I am obviously a pretty huge fan of Days of Thunder, and I give it 4 out of 5 stars. I, again, have seen this many times throughout my life. So when I was in my younger teen years, watched it quite a few times in my 20s, and now watching it in my 30s. I appreciate this for different reasons than I did when I was younger, and I still think it is quite delightful. Really good performances and good characterizations here of people, even though there are plenty of problematic storylines, specifically with the females in this movie. This is still just a wonderful movie to watch, I think, and there's just a lot about it that I just love every time, whether it's the relationships between the characters or the way that Tom Cruise's Cole Trickle moves throughout the story, from his introduction into it to becoming a hotshot, winning races guy, to the horrible crash that happens at Daytona. I mean, I will say, they filmed that really well, because like there's no way that a human's not dying from that crash that he was in. And then obviously he moves on from that. But there's just so much here to like for me, especially of a film from this era. And I think that it really hit a lot of the right notes. And for that reason, I give it a 4 out of 5. So if you out there have any thoughts on Days of Thunder, always feel free to try to find us by emailing us at filmtankshow@gmail.com, or reaching out to us either on Facebook or Twitter at filmtankshow. Also, you can find our episodes on filmtankshow.com, or also on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher and other places.
Spotify.
There it is. I always forget it. It's
We're
just a running
just
joke at
as
this time.
popular as the Joe Rogan Experience.
Man, he's having a time here. We'll say that.
I mean, it's not a bad time necessarily for him.
No, we'll see if that keeps going. I don't know.
He really has to go, like, in my opinion, off the deep end to truly ruin what he's got going, because what he's got going is pretty much impervious to the things that would normally derail somebody's, career. So
Yeah, I mean, we obviously don't need to get into it, but
no, we need to get into this.
Yeah, I pretty much agree, but I also wish that it wasn't true. Anyways, so yep, that is what we've got on this film, Days of Thunder. Coming up on our next episode, our friend Sam is going to join us again. And the film that she suggested to me that she would like to do is a film that I had heard about, which came out on Netflix last year, that I'll be honest, I had no interest in, but I'm interested to take some time and watch, which is the film starring Zac Efron about Ted Bundy, which is extremely wicked, shockingly evil, and vile. That title is really something.
I think you messed up the title. It's extremely wicked, shockingly evil, and vile, incredibly close, and it's very loud. Everybody remember when 9/11 dramas were all the rage?
Oh, man.
They were fetch.
I mean, you had Adam Sandler in one, so that
Did you not like that movie?
No, I'll say this: I have not watched that in a hot minute.
I enjoyed
when it came out. Let me look up the year because I'd be curious really quick. Of course, we're talking about Reign Over Me. Let me just see here. Okay, that was 2007. Yeah, I was 14 when that came out, and I watched it then, and I loved it then. That doesn't make me think I would love it today, but I don't necessarily. I really would have to rewatch that before I gave any sort of opinion, because that is a very oh boy, what's the word I want to use? That is a lot of choices are made. Let's put it that way.
Yep. So I will agree with you, but I will say this, and this is something I thought about last week when my friend suggested this to me, and I was like, okay. And I feel like I kind of feel the same way, and I'm sure there's an exception to this, but man, there are not a lot of bad Don Cheadle movies out there.
No, I would probably agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's some, and this may be one of them, because I also have not seen this in over a decade.
He's got one of the worst lines in Crash, so I guess that's probably the definitive bad Don Cheadle.
What are you talking about? That won Best Picture. It's good.
Yeah, that literally has for being a quote-unquote moving meditation.
I thought you were going to say for being a quote-unquote movie.
Well, that too. But for being a moving meditation on race and racial tension, that literally had the scene where he answered the phone and said, "What's up, mama? I'm fucking a white girl." Despite the fact that he's technically supposed to be a pretty, not straight-laced, but normal person anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, that won Best Picture.
Yeah, but you know what? We can all just pretend that it was an honorary Best Picture win for David Cronenberg's Crash from the 90s, so that's all good.
I don't know, because I've seen Crash, but I have not seen what's the one that won 2 years ago with
Green Book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have not seen that either. That's the first Best Picture since the 90s that I have not sat down to watch.
I'd be interested if that's worse than Crash.
I don't think it could be, because unfortunately Crash, I mean, I think they'd be pretty equal, but like Krat's entire shall we say MO is to try to offer scope. And if you are failing at depicting any sort of authentic race relations, and you're also trying to say, here's 10 different versions of fucking realism compared to Green Book's shitty make-believe story about one interaction, I kind of give the benefit of the doubt to Crash, but that's just me.
And I guess I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. That also was the year when most people thought that Brokeback Mountain should have won Best Picture, right?
I think that was the same year, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting times. Anyways, we will see what everyone thinks about that Zac Efron Ted Bundy movie next week. The last episode with Sam was not a movie that I loved, but I'm going to give another one a chance, and we will see how it goes. So look forward to that coming up on next week's episode. Anna, as always, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, as always.
And just another tease to go off of what Anna mentioned early in the episode. The next time we get together later on this summer, again, who knows when the episode will come out, we're going to do an episode on the classic movie Jaws. So look forward to that.
Nom, 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 nom.
And I can confirm from a discussion earlier this year that Toussaint has not seen Jaws because I said a detail from it and he was like, haha, yeah. And I was like, you haven't seen that. He's like, nope.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
It was also the movie where Nick reminded me how I can't do math, so...
What? Really? Why what? Oh, when you talked about Richard Dreyfuss?
Yes, because I talked about how old he was,
and
I got it wrong.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know about that. That's okay.
But now I forever know how old Richard Dreyfuss was when Jaws came out.
No, but there's some powerhouse performances in that movie.
Oh yeah.
Also, that movie spawned a lot of sequels, and oh man, come on, don't talk about Bruce that way. There's a lot of. Oh man!
I don't care how bad that movie is. I'm never gonna not remember that joke from Strange Wilderness.
I was gonna say that's a Steve Zahn reference, isn't it?
I honestly want to rewatch that entire movie just for that joke. So maybe one of these days.
No, that's good. I've watched that clip numerous times, and it's great. There's a really random joke early in that clip that's actually hilarious. That has nothing to do with that obnoxious. Anyways, Jaws has a pretty solid performance from Roy Scheider and also from Robert Shaw, who I'm pretty sure was drunk the entire film, which is good because he's playing an alcoholic character. But and have you seen it, Anna, or have you not?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. His description of I think is it World War II or Vietnam? I can't remember.
It probably had to be Vietnam, is my guess. Yeah, I think Vietnam.
I'm not positive, but he tells a story about a wartime in that film that is like pretty deep for that story. I mean, that was a film that literally had a mayor being like, "We got to stay open." Well, actually, that seems very fitting now in this era, but it's a very silly movie for a lot of it. But yes, it cuts pretty deep at that one part, and then a couple other parts too. So
apparently it was World War II.
Was it?
You're talking about the character of Quint?
Yes.
Yep. It's okay. Came up with the backstory of Quint as a survivor of World War II, the USS Indianapolis.
Oh, I was incorrect.
Okay. I wouldn't have known, so I am just going to Wikipedia.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially since it was a 1975 film. And be like, "Oh, back in Nam," it'd be like, "Ooh, okay." So, no, that's all good. But anyways, going to look forward to that down the road with Anna at some point. So, from Anna Bodozadu, Nick Cheney, myself, Alex Diekman, as always, thank you very much to everybody for joining us here on Film Tank. We'll be catching up with you next time.